All right, so we're back, and today we're going to be doing a deep dive into something that I think a lot of people have thought about, especially, if you live in a city.
Yeah.
It's that whole village life versus city life.
Right.
So we found this really interesting podcast episode called Village Life versus City Life. Which one is better? From the Speakeasy podcast.
Oh, cool.
And it's actually designed for people learning English.
Oh, wow.
So it's like super clear.
That's awesome.
And easy to understand, and they lay out these different points. So I thought it would be a good source for us to kind of dig into.
Definitely, yeah, because like that question on its surface seems so simple.
Yeah.
Right. But then when you actually like think about all the nuances and like the different things that go into each lifestyle, heck, it's really complicated.
Yeah, because it's easy to, kind of romanticize that village life.
Oh, yeah.
Peace and quiet, fresh air, like knowing all your neighbor.
Yeah, the birds are chirping. You wake up to the rooster.
Yeah, exactly. But like,
the smell of fresh baked bread.
Is it really all that it's cracked up to be?
Right. And that's, that's kind of the image that the podcast starts off with is that very idyllic image.
Yeah.
But actually there's a lot of science to back that up.
Really?
Yeah. So they talk about how, there are studies showing that lower noise pollution, which you definitely get in the village setting, and then also stronger social connections can actually have a really positive impact on people's mental well-being.
So like that whole it takes a village thing, maybe there's actually something to that.
Yeah. Yeah. It seems that way. But they also, throw in some reality checks too.
Okay.
So they talk about, limited access to things like schools or hospitals.
Right.
Could be a huge problem for people, especially like families.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And then they talk about...
What about work? Like not everyone's,
Not everyone's cut out to be a farmer.
Right. Or run the local pub.
Yeah, exactly. So the economic opportunities are often tied to very specific industries, which might not be a good fit for everyone. And then also, getting around.
Yeah, like if you're relying on public transport to get around in a village, you might be in for some long waits.
Oh, yeah.
Like they actually gave an example of someone having to wait an hour for the only bus that came into town.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That could get old fast.
Definitely.
So maybe it's not as carefree as those like travel brochures would make it seem.
Definitely not. There are definitely some practical considerations to weigh.
Yeah.
But all right, so let's shift gears a little bit. Let's head into the city.
Okay.
What comes to mind when you think of like that urban environment?
For me, it's like the energy.
Okay.
Like, all the career paths and the different cultures and just like the constant buzz. It's like a giant melting pot of like experiences. Yeah. 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 And that's a really common perception. And for many people, it rings true. Like the podcast emphasized how cities attract people who are looking for very specific career paths or educational opportunities that, they just wouldn't find elsewhere.
Right.
And also, that constant influx of different cultures can be incredibly enriching as well.
But is it really a melting pot, though?
Yeah.
If, like, everyone stays in their own little bubbles,
right.
Like, how easy is it to actually integrate into that, like, urban fabric?
That's a great question. And that's something that the podcast brings up is, just because a city offers diversity doesn't mean that it automatically erases, all those societal barriers or guarantees inclusion.
Right.
So it's
like you might be surrounded by different cultures.
Yeah.
But are you actually like connecting with them?
Exactly. So it's a nuanced issue. But so the city might win in terms of diversity. It definitely loses points when it comes to things like stress.
Oh, yeah.
The podcast actually mentioned a study where city dwellers had significantly higher levels of cortisol.
Wow.
Which is the stress hormone.
So that's like concrete evidence that all that hustle and bustle can actually like take a toll. Yeah, and then there's like the cost of living, which is always so high in cities.
Absolutely. Yeah. They didn't shy away from the downsides. They pointed out that like finding affordable housing in a major city can be incredibly difficult.
Yeah.
Especially for like young people who are just starting out.
So it's almost like you're trading peace of mind.
Yeah.
For opportunity.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah. I guess it really comes down to what you value most. Like some people might thrive on that city energy while others might find it totally draining.
Right. And that's what makes this whole discussion so interesting.
Yeah.
There's no like one size fits all answer. It really depends on your personality, your priorities. And what you're willing to compromise on.
Totally. And it's funny because like both the village and the city kind of have these like romanticized images, but the reality is probably a lot more complex.
Right.
The podcast even had like the host share a personal anecdote about how, you know.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like we all carry these perceptions, whether we've actually lived in both those environments or not.
Totally. Like, I grew up in the suburbs, so I have this idea of village life, like being super quaint and peaceful. But maybe that's just like based on movies and books.
Yeah. It's important to separate those preconceived notions from the actual lived experiences.
So how do we do that? Like, how do we move beyond just the stereotypes and like figure out which setting actually like aligns with our values?
Well, I think a good place to start is by examining those values. Like, what are your non-negotiables?
Okay.
For example, if having access to specialized healthcare is crucial for you or your family, that might make city life more appealing, despite the downsides.
Right.
Or let's say, being close to extended family is a top priority.
Yeah.
Maybe that points you towards a village where, generations of your family have lived for decades.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So it's about identifying what matters most and then seeing which environment best supports those needs.
Okay, so what if it's not that clear cut, though?
Right.
Like, what if you crave both, like the peace of the countryside and the excitement of the city?
That's where things get really interesting. And they actually touch on that a little bit in the podcast.
Okay.
Talking about like a hybrid lifestyle,
Yeah.
So maybe you live on the outskirts of a city where you can enjoy,
Yeah.
Some peace and quiet, but still be close to, urban amenities.
Or you could flip it and be that person who brings a bit of city energy to the village.
Ooh, I like
that. Starting a cool cafe or an art studio or something.
Yeah, I love that idea.
Yeah.
It's about getting creative and finding ways to blend the best of both worlds. And technology plays a role here too. And they talk about how, remote work has opened up possibilities for people to live in more rural areas.
Totally.
While still having these really fulfilling careers.
That's like a total game changer.
Yeah.
It's almost like the lines between village and city life are becoming more blurred.
In some ways they are.
Yeah.
And it's not as simple as it used to be, which I think is a good thing. It means we have more options to create a life that truly fits our individual needs.
And those needs can change over time too, right?
Absolutely.
Like what appeals to you at 25 might be totally different from what you want at 45.
Exactly, yeah. And that's something that they didn't explicitly say, but I think it's important to acknowledge is that, our ideal lifestyle isn't static.
Right.
It's a journey.
Yeah.
It's not a destination.
It's so true. Like maybe right now that quiet village life sounds amazing because you're burnt out from the city hustle. But who knows, in 5 years, you might be craving that energy again.
Totally. And that's okay. It's about being open to those shifts and adjusting your choices accordingly.
Yeah.
The key is to make conscious choices, to actively design a life that aligns with your values at each stage.
We're like the architects of our own lives.
I like that analogy.
Yeah.
We have the power to decide what kind of space we want to inhabit, both literally and figuratively.
And that space doesn't have to be fixed. It can like evolve and grow with us.
Exactly. So as we kind of wrap up this part of the discussion,
okay,
I want to leave you with a thought. Think about yourself 5 years from now.
Okay.
Picture yourself in both settings, the tranquil village and the vibrant city.
Ooh, I like where this is going.
Which version feels more authentically you? Where do you see yourself thriving and growing and contributing in a way that feels meaningful?
Yeah, it's like you've got those two movie trailers playing in your head and you're trying to figure out which one like speaks to you more.
Right. And the beauty of it is that you're not just a passive viewer. You're the director. You're the screenwriter, the lead actor. You get to create the whole experience.
I love that. Okay, so that's awesome.
Yeah.
But there's this part of me that's still kind of stuck on that like no right answer thing.
I get it. It can be a little unsettling to not have a clear-cut solution.
Yeah.
But the truth is that's life, isn't it?
Right.
We're constantly faced with choices, and there's rarely like one objectively correct path.
So how do we get comfortable with that? Like, how do we make a choice when we're looking at two options that both have, pros and cons?
Well, the podcast touched on something really key here, which is that it's about understanding your own personal values.
Oh, okay.
And letting those guide your decision.
So instead of getting caught up in like the shoulds and the should nots, it's more about tuning into what like speaks to you.
Exactly. And that might mean, challenging some of those ingrained beliefs about village life versus city life. Maybe you've always thought you were a city person, but when you really dig deep, you realize that craving for peace and quiet isn't just a phase. It's like a fundamental part of who you are.
Or maybe you've romanticized the village life, but then you're like, wait a minute, I actually really like the energy and the diversity.
Exactly. It's about being honest with yourself and letting go of any of those external pressures to conform to a certain ideal.
Right.
And remember, it's okay if your ideal shifts over time. Mm-hmm. What matters is that you're consciously making choices that align with your current needs and aspirations.
I think this whole deep dive has really been an eye-opener for me.
Yeah, me too.
The thing that I think is sticking with me the most is this idea of not just choosing like a place to live, but choosing a life.
It's a really powerful reframing, isn't it? Mm-hmm. It takes the focus off of geography and puts it squarely on, the kind of experience you want to create for yourself.
Yeah, and that experience is completely within our control. We get to decide what kind of energy we surround ourselves with, what kind of communities we build.
Right.
What kind of impact we make.
Beautifully said. And it all starts with that internal reflection, that willingness to ask ourselves, what do I truly value? What kind of life do I want to wake up to every day?
So, dear listener, as you go about your day, we want to leave you with this final thought. If you could design your ideal life, what would it look like?
Yeah.
And what small steps can you take, starting today, to make that vision a reality?
Whether you're drawn to the rolling hills of the countryside or the bright lights of the city, the most important ingredient in this whole equation is you.
And that's it for our deep dive into village life versus city life.
Yeah.
Hopefully this conversation has sparked some new insights for you and maybe even inspired you to rethink your own definition of, the perfect place to call home.
Remember, there's no right or wrong answer.
Yeah.
The journey is yours to create.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.